This is the Back Porch Education Podcast. Today, Steve and I honor teachers. Enjoy the show.
Get your education. Back Porch Education.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Steve, I've got a short poem. We've probably heard it before, but I don't even care if we have. It's, I'm like Martin Luther. People, not in a lot of ways,
Okay.
but in this way.
Keep you away from the inkwell.
Right. So he said, somebody asked him, hey, Martin, why do you preach the same message every time? Every Sunday you preach the same thing. And he said, because you all walk in here like you don't believe it.
So, what sermon are you preaching to us poetically today?
The sermon, the word, right, that I have for us is from Wendell Berry. This beautiful, beautiful three-lined poem is, I think, particularly appropriate for honoring the work of teachers.
Okay.
It is entitled Like Snow. Suppose we did our work like the snow, quietly, quietly, leaving nothing out.
Mr. Wendell Berry.
Mr. Wendell Berry, indeed.
So, suppose we did do our work like the snow.
Yeah.
Quietly is difficult for teachers.
It is.
I mean,
It is.
we should speak.
Yeah. But there's
a manner of speaking that
there
could
is
be
a
called.
sound of snow. It's not
Yeah.
silently. It's not, he doesn't say silently, right?
Quietly.
Quietly. Leaving nothing out.
That's the important part.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. So this is our annual teacher appreciation show.
Yes.
That corresponds in its publication with the National Teacher Appreciation Day.
Mm-hmm.
And in good English teacher fashion, I understand you decided let's look at this term appreciation. What are we talking about?
All right. So I don't have it in front of me, but the as I recall, I dug into etymology. My students certainly know about me that I enjoy looking at etymologies, right? Who was it? I think Emerson said every word was once a poem. Okay? And I think Frost said every word was once a glowing young metaphor. Right? It's pretty beautiful. So I think about those things when I think about words. I like to try to dig into and uncover the original sense, the way that it was first. How did it come into the world, right? And to appreciate, we use it like we appreciate our teachers, but you can instantly start thinking about other ways that word is used even today, right? You might say...
Economics.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciation, depreciation.
Exactly. A house may appreciate in value. What else? Appreciate... I'm not sure I have another example.
Well, does the root have anything to do with precious and
right? So current
precise,
usage aside, as we go back, right, to appreciate something is to estimate the value, right? You know what? It may have something in common with appraise. To appraise.
Yeah.
But in any event, appreciate is to estimate the value or potentially to add to the value, or it has to do with valuation. Right.
Perhaps demonstrating the value of something.
Yeah, it could. That's right. It could be demonstration.
I think when we say a Teacher Appreciation Day,
yeah,
we're trying to demonstrate that this person is valuable.
yeah, that's right. We're right through gratitude, through small gifts, through
Right.
whatever. Okay, that is
Make them
totally
feel
what we're trying to do.
special.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's
which is I think, noble desire.
yeah.
However, I want to push a little beyond that and say that rather than merely appreciating teachers, what we really ought to do is honor them, right? Not try to estimate their value, but rather acknowledge that which is in them, which cannot be estimated in terms of value. Mm-hmm. Right? So it is, I think, honoring someone is not saying, oh, look, you did this work, good job on you, I know how much that's worth, but rather saying, you do more than I could know.
Perhaps to borrow the phrase is implying that the teacher's work is like snow.
Yeah, right.
That when done best, it's almost it looks effortless. Mm-hmm. It looks natural,
unhurried.
I often hear that a teacher that thing that teachers do is you're either born with it or you're not. Another conversation, and I'm not
Sure.
certain that that's in the entire
Scope,
truth
maybe. Yeah, right.
of it. But we know what we mean when we say that.
Sure.
That a good, true teacher isn't being something they're not.
Right.
They are being the best of what they are. And that's worthy of honor.
That's
more
right.
than just payment.
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
I think that's, at least for me, something to think about as we enjoin our listeners and ourselves to consider how they might honor the teachers in their lives, whether it's teachers of them or their children.
Right.
To recognize that all too often today, everything in life becomes a somewhat financial algorithm.
Yeah.
And appreciation even becomes, wow, they gave me a $5 gift. They must not think very much of me.
Right.
Wow, this is a $100 gift certificate. Wow.
Yeah.
That it's not the dollar amount,
No.
right? That there is a way, with or without the expenditure of money. Let's put that aside for a moment.
Absolutely.
There is a way to communicate to others that you honor them, that you understand how valuable they are and so a lot of it is ends, right?
Yeah.
What makes it valuable?
What makes the work or what makes the person?
What makes that teacher's
right.
work
right.
similar to snow, if you will?
Yeah.
Necessary to our lives.
Yeah.
Because they're not teaching and a pedicure are different in their nature.
Right.
I'm
That's
not
right.
saying pedicures are completely illegitimate,
No, sure.
but they are superfluous to the absolute necessities of life.
Right.
Whereas teaching, without any of it in our lives, we are not human.
Right. That's right. That's right. That's right. We're not.
So
I think human is the right word there, right? We may be alive.
Teacher appreciation has to get above the notion of a tip,
Yes.
a gratuity.
Yes. Well, or even recompense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
like
we know you don't get paid
you.
much money.
Right.
Here's
a
little
stimulus
more.
check. Right. Okay. So yeah, this comes out of a book that you and I have been through together on the podcast.
Yeah.
Good old Joseph Pieper himself, right? In chapter 4, Pieper of leisure, the basis of culture. Pieper talks about the distinction between an honorarium and a wage. Mm-hmm. And I think it is, let me just go ahead and, I try to not give a lot of imperatives, but let me just go ahead and give one here. Teachers, don't view your pay as a wage. View it as an honorarium. I think it's better for you that way. I think that's more accurately what it is. There are those, the way that Pieper draws the line is either through the liberal arts or the servile arts.
Right.
Right. So if you are performing the servile arts, then you are paid a wage. Okay? So,
fair market value.
Exactly, right. So if you're delivering something or putting up fence or, balancing the books or whatever it is.
Working at a farm supply.
Exactly, right. Working at a farm supply store, organizing drill bits, as I often have. Then you are practicing the servile arts, that is the useful arts for exchange of money. It's a business transaction.
Your time and talent
Yes.
is being turned into treasure.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so then it is fitting that you're paid for that labor, and you're paid wages.
Yeah.
But what Pieper says is that those who practice the liberal arts, the 7 liberal arts, are not paid fair market value for their work, but rather in the practice of the arts, they are honored with some amount of money, right? Or something.
Yeah.
And so that can come in a lot of shapes and sizes and amounts and whatever. But I'm just saying that to the extent we ought to remember that, of course, we do perform some servile arts, right? Lunch duty would probably be one of those.
Yes.
But there is, too, an honorarium component of all work, says Pieper. And I tend to agree with him. And I'm just going to notice that when I receive my paycheck thinking this is an honorarium, I feel better. It's a more uplifting experience.
Now you're back into Plato and his discussions for us of in particular. So let's talk about Socrates' trial for a moment.
Okay, the apology.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you remember his first defense when he sets out his defense of his work? Right. So let's set the scene for folks.
Yeah.
Socrates is on trial for doing what?
For dishonoring the gods and corrupting the youth.
Dishonoring the gods, corrupting the youth by
his philosophy and theology?
And asking questions.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
no, but I mean, it's all philosophy,
Right.
theology, his demeanor, his behavior,
Right.
as a teacher, has been called into question as being heretical,
Right.
blasphemous, and he is, if found guilty, going to be given the choice of drinking the hemlock, committing suicide, or being banished from Athens for life.
Right.
And we know he was found guilty and was given the choice, and he could not face the horrors of being alive and not being an Athenian. So he had a lengthy conversation
With Credo and others.
with his friends who were there with him as he hefted the weight of that goblet and at some point drank it willingly. One might say philosophically. But his first, he is allowed to defend his
Right.
position, to give his apology.
That's right.
In its correct form.
Yes.
His defense.
Defense.
And his first argument is, I have never been paid for what I teach.
Right.
Right?
I remember that he says, yes, my apology. I remember the part where he says, for what I have done, you ought to give me quite a bit of money, right?
Right.
Like
Well, no.
per year, and food in the pantry and all this stuff, right?
The background to that is his lifelong enemies are the sophists,
Yes, who
Right.
are paid.
who do what they do for pay.
Yes.
Not they get paid for doing something they really love, and so it's like an honorarium.
Right.
No, we work out the deal up front,
Yes.
and when we're happy with what we're going to get paid,
Yeah.
then we deliver to you the goods.
Yeah. The original
Which
paywall.
we're supposed to be. Yes, yes. Right.
Right.
And what were they trying to deliver? What the liberal arts.
Yeah.
But for an entirely different motive, for personal gain, and to not provide someone with a free life, but to provide someone with the power of the knowledge they had, the techniques they had. And so throughout, you see Socrates / Plato and their buddy Aristotle
Yep.
regularly pushing back against sophistry. Right? And so I am not a sophist.
Right.
What I have done, and he makes the distinction in there. To me, this is where we get to teacher honorification.
Yeah, right. Honoration.
Appreciation.
Sure.
Is so Socrates states very clearly, when you start paying for education, and he reminds us, education is the cultivation of virtue,
Yes.
which is kind of a big deal around this podcast.
Yes.
If you're attempting to cultivate virtue in someone else and you're getting paid to do that, it's rarely honest. You want the paycheck, so you figure out how to manipulate virtue in someone else, as opposed to the cultivation or the catching of the transfer of virtue through a relationship of love. In the end of the day, it's not a relationship of love. It's a
Right.
okay, I've put my 2 hours in. That's the end of our session.
Right.
Did your dad include a check today?
Yeah, right.
Or we do take PayPal.
Right.
And so it struck me as we were thinking about this stuff, and you brought up the honoring. This is an old discussion. I'll never forget one of my seniors for their senior thesis wanted to their thesis was teachers should not be paid because she had read Socrates.
Okay.
And at that time, we assigned students to teachers. The teacher was
Kind of
paid to be their advisor.
Okay.
And the particular lady, when she found out what the thing said, I don't want to advise this. It's just, interestingly enough, and I won't get into all of her thoughts, but when she did arrive at the defense of her thesis at the end of the year, she actually wound up arguing against it.
Oh, against, that is for teacher pay.
For teacher pay. And her basic thesis had morphed into, we need teachers too much to depend on just altruistic ones being if I had to depend on just
we got to grease the skids a little bit here. Or this thing's never going to get off the ground.
Money's too important around here. We got to use it to get what we want. We want some good teachers, and in fact, maybe we should pay teachers better because then I might have better teachers. What's her basic drift?
Wow.
But
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I've thrown a wrench into the whole thing.
No, I think
thinking
that's
about
there.
what a teacher is and what we honor in them. I guess if what we honor in teaching is this is making my kid have a higher earning potential, then it is a business transaction.
Yeah. I don't even know if I would use the word honor there. I think I would use the word appreciate, literally. If that's what we're appreciating in the teacher is sort of input-output sort of thing, right? Where go to this teacher.
Stopping short of bribery, but it starts to feel almost like if we paid you more, could you make our kid better?
Right.
Right. And that's, I think, part of Socrates' point is that you can't. Money doesn't work in this realm.
Yeah.
And we know that because we've had teachers who got paid tremendous amounts of money fall short, and some others who maybe were nobodies in the financial world of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that teaching ability isn't put your dollar in and get $1 worth of teaching out.
No. That's right.
In fact, it can mess the whole thing up.
That's right.
It can make for laziness. It can make for a lot of things that.
Right. This makes me think about the way that
starving the teachers the best.
No.
The best out of them.
No, that's
Don't
yeah.
want that to be what we got down today.
Demerits will continue until morale improves. This makes me think of the way that how I do like ACT, SAT tutoring, right?
Right.
I get paid money, like way better money per hour doing that than teaching, right? And if somebody, I draw a pretty firm line in that tutoring, and I'm always quick to say and remind both the student and the teacher, the student and the parent that
the customer,
exactly, the customers, that what I'm doing here is not teaching. It is tutoring. It is coaching is typically the word that I like to use, even more than tutoring.
Yeah.
And I'm good at it. So you should pay me if you want the results of my coaching, if it works for your financial situation and whatever, right? But I am not teaching your child in this, right? I am coaching him how to beat this one particular test. And there's a lot of information that can be crammed pretty efficiently, but I don't think that teaching is the transmission of information.
Right.
And I think that teaching is very inefficient, much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of all of the business leaders who have a hankering for fixing the educational system. Okay.
Right.
No doubt there are a great many problems in the educational system. So many, in fact, that you and I have decided we want to talk about it every once in a while. Right. But we want to focus on solutions, and be careful what you call waste, I guess is what I'm going to say in terms of teaching. There's a lot of times, and typically it often is time, that looks like time wasted to someone who is focused on information delivery. But I'm not. And so there is wisdom or virtue, God willing, being developed, being cultivated in that time.
Right. Well, so back to Pieper. Right?
Yeah.
That at the heart of this is contemplation. At the heart of this is the quietness of the snow.
Yeah.
At the heart of this is an environment. What the teacher is attempting to do is, in many cases today, subtract things rather than add things. Trying to teach a child to subtract all the distractions and all of the attention deficits that they've been programmed into, and get them to have sustained, rational discourse with an author, or with a fellow classmate, or with the teacher in the classroom. And we dishonor teachers when we start trying to measure them with a ruler that doesn't measure teaching.
That's right.
So that's a big deal on our podcast, is what is the nature of education. This cultivation of wisdom and virtue is much different than how many factoids have you packed into the brain today.
Yes.
And it's interesting, the internet has brought this out some, not that this is another episode on technology in the classroom, but the use of the internet and the fact that my students have way more information available to them at this present moment.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
Right? But you can Google things so much faster than you can find them in a textbook. And it's so much more readily available than a teacher, right?
Yep.
That if you define education these days as information acquisition,
everyone's educated right now. I mean,
I no
we're
longer
swimming in the
need
stuff.
to pass tests. I've got Google.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me how often my students want to have this argument, right? Because some folks still define education along these lines of testable knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's just not, it never has been where it was at.
Right.
We defined it that way for a while, I think, for the efficiency experts and for the desire to be able to put a number to our students and this sort of thing. All stuff that we've already talked about. But when we go to honor teachers, let's honor them for what they're supposed to be doing well.
Right.
Which is being someone, and in that being, inviting the students into that mode of being.
Right.
The mode of a questioner, the mode of a thinker, the mode of a worshiper,
Yes.
the mode of a reader and writer and so
Right.
on.
Well, it's to go back to Pieper. It's to be part of the cult.
Yes.
To be part of the culture.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
We are enculturating.
Right.
And yeah, I think.
Well, so think of another time when in our nation's past, a group of people did not feel honored for their gender.
Okay.
And the women's movement began. If you go look at that, yes, there was some of them wanted to go out and be able to earn wages,
Yeah.
and work for equal pay.
Sure.
But a lot of that was the second or third wave of feminism in America. The first main wave of, if you go look at what they wanted, they wanted to vote.
Yes.
They wanted a voice in their government and that makes sense. But they mention often an equal seat at the cult, an equal seat in culture. Why is it that a lady's got to change her name to George Eliot
Right.
to get Middlemarch published?
Yep.
Because women weren't welcome.
Right.
Why is it the vast majority of painters, thinkers, musicians, etc.,
Yep.
of their era were men? Because the women were not welcome. They were not honored as a vibrant member of
The culture.
the culture, and
Yeah.
that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And that was what was honoring to them. And it's interesting that you've heard it, I've heard it. Well, if you can't do anything else, teach.
Sure. Those who can't do, teach.
Yeah, that very dishonoring,
Oh, sure.
abusive notion that it's just sort of a dead-end job. If you measure a job financially, the earning power of a teacher is not that of a Wall Street, whatever they are these days.
Yeah, sure. An engineer. Yeah, sure.
A doctor, etc.
Yeah.
But maybe there's another motive other than just its earning power.
Yeah.
In fact, I think one of the purifying elements of education is, and it's interesting you start with Wendell Berry, right? I heard him speak one time. He was speaking at an educational conference, but he doesn't claim to be an educator. He comments on education from time to time. He's taught at the collegiate level. But he said, if I'm at an educational conference, I got to say something about education. So here's my 3 minutes on education. And his main point was, it needs to be a whole lot more local.
Okay.
Right? The decision making shouldn't be way off somewhere that is completely ignorant of the people being affected by the decisions.
Like 10 miles away that's way off.
That's way off.
Yeah.
No, it needs to be very, very local.
Absolutely.
And then the hush that came across this, and this is a pretty, we're honoring him. He's at the conference to be honored for a lifetime of supporting classical education.
Yeah.
And his next words brought this real hush. Because he says, the other thing I think it needs to get a lot more of is poor. It needs to get a lot poorer.
Wow.
And he didn't explain it. He went right off into his acceptance speech, which was a series of little short stories that he had written.
Right.
So the conversation afterwards.
Right.
What?
Right.
Because if anything, people think that there's not enough money in education, right? That it needs to be honored more, it needs to be paid more, it needs more cash.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to know exactly what he meant, but I have slowly come, if what he means by that is that we continue to try and solve educational problems with cash,
Right.
I think I agree with him. Because there's a false notion that if we just give it more, it'll somehow do better. And that's rarely the case,
Right.
frankly.
Well, I wonder if it has to do something with this idea of, how can I say it? There are those moments where you can convince yourself. Let's move to the realm of sort of theology for a second, so that I can flesh this point out and then transfer it back. There are those moments where you sort of can convince yourself that you're actually a pretty good person, right? And maybe not convince yourself, but at least walk around like it.
Right, well, at least somewhat comparatively. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
as bad as-
exactly.
Yeah.
But
Hitler seems to.
then, yeah, exactly. He's really the punching bag, as he should be. But then there are those other moments when you do something beyond boneheaded, right? I mean, sinful, bad, and you see then your own shortcomings, your own failings, and you don't even have the option of acting like you're actually a decent guy. I wonder if education got a lot poorer, we wouldn't even have the option of acting like we're being paid wages. Right? Like, this is so not commensurate with what it's not necessarily the payment to in the hand of the teacher monthly. That's not what I'm saying. But if the school worked with very, very little money, then we would not even have the option of acting like what we're doing here can be measured in terms of money.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that the danger of money in education? Is that you act, if there's enough money put in to education, then we can convince ourselves that just a little bit more and things will be as they should be.
Right.
When what we should say, because this is what is true, is this stuff doesn't work here. The money doesn't do. This isn't. We're using the wrong kind of stuff to try to measure this.
We're back to the Apologia.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he gets into a whole discussion of what money can and cannot do. And his first defense, you haven't paid me in money for my teaching of virtue.
Right.
He then feels compelled to go into this kind of whole economics lesson about what money can and can't do. And it can't do everything.
Yeah.
As an ontological thing. It has a nature
Right.
that is as limited as the nature of anything else.
Yes.
Money is good as itself.
Right.
It can certainly be put towards evil ends or good ends.
Right.
And it should be put towards good and not towards evil.
Of course.
But it can't do all good.
Exactly.
Right? It's got a place.
Right.
And I think that, to my former student's point, we need teachers. And in a market capitalist society as we have, they've got to eat and live in a house and so on. And so we have to find a way to trade, to barter the expertise and the life that they have to share with our students in exchange for that which they need to be able to do that. And I think that's at the heart of what we're discussing today, is it's not just as simple as, well, so how many bucks is that?
Yeah. Right.
That you can pay teachers pretty well and still not honor them.
Yep.
They can, in fact, get to go back to theology for a moment, the difference between a shepherd and a hireling.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
The shepherd loves the sheep,
Yes.
and that's the teacher you want,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
The hireling, make sure the gate's closed, but the sheep get a little unruly and the rod comes out.
Yep. That's right.
And I'm just getting paid to keep you people here.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it's an interesting metaphor, and it's an intended metaphor. Jesus' part about the role of himself and the apostles and pastors of
Yep.
sheep herders. That the correct mentality is that one of, I'm not doing this just for Friday and the paycheck.
Right.
I'm doing this for you.
Yep.
And me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think the best teaching has a little bit of a I could do no else to it.
Yeah.
An internal motivation of this is what I love, this is what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. The Thoreau keeps coming to my mind in this conversation because and in particular his notion of politics. He says something about I'm not going to be able to just rip it off here, but he's in at the end of civil resistance to the government, I think is what it's called. He talks about how Daniel Webster is a great constitutionalist, but he is unwilling to think about how the world should be outside of the Constitution. He's not a leader. He's a follower. He follows the Constitution, right? And he says consistency is the lawyer's truth, or at least a consistent expediency. So the lawyer's truth, that is Daniel Webster's truth, is not truth, but constancy. And I think about that because where he goes from there is to say we don't have many good politicians. Well, he makes a much stronger claim than that, actually. but we have not had a good politician because politicians assume the system. They can't account for, or they can't imagine a world where their system that they're inhabiting doesn't exist the way that it is now.
Yeah.
And so they're unwilling to follow truth to its furthest reaches. And I think that as I am a teacher and as I am exhorting you and other teachers, I think that's what I want for us, to be willing to acknowledge what is good about the system that we're in, but also not be bound by it and the wages that it pays.
Yeah, back to your initial statement. Don't look at the paycheck
Right.
as a paycheck.
Right. Be willing to follow truth in teaching, however that ends up looking. And if that means doing something different than what you have done, then that's okay. That's good, right?
Yeah.
Follow truth, and insofar as you do that, you are deserving of honor.
Yeah. My dad used to get on my case because I read all the time. You need to get out there and get a marketable skill and do something.
Yeah.
And it was my second year of teaching. They came to visit. They lived in Kansas. I was out in Baltimore teaching. And we were spending some time together, and it must have been, maybe it wasn't this many times, but it feels like 24 times in my, from 0 to 18, my father had said to me, you don't get paid for reading.
Right.
And so I kind of, as a 20-something-year-old's going to do, kind of twisted my mouth a little bit and said,
Yeah.
Dad, pay me to read. And yet, it communicated my feeling.
Yeah.
I get paid to do this.
Yeah.
And it's good that I do. It allows me to focus on that, right? But I think, work another job if that's what was necessary. I wouldn't be as good a teacher if I had to support myself, my hobby of teaching.
Right. Outside of.
I've had that experience, right? I've been at a school where they paid me more to clean the school than to teach at it.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, but again, one's a market value thing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm competing with other cleaners for a contract.
Right.
The other is, and I get it, especially I've been in private education, so there's all this money that's being coercively taken from the taxpayer to support a free education system.
Right.
Free with
scare quotes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, some parents choose to pay more money in tuition to a private school.
Right.
It's interesting in our conversation, we haven't mentioned this yet, but it's been in my head. The cheapest route in money for an education these days seems in many ways to quote unquote be the most effective. Pound for pound, homeschooling is producing some of the better educated students in America today, especially if you're working off of our definition of wisdom and virtue.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right?
No doubt.
They may not have the shiny labs and all the cool stuff.
Sure.
Typically don't have the football team and that sort of thing. But if what you're
we're talking about education.
Yeah, if you're measuring education as wisdom and virtue, homeschooling for the cheapest price.
Yeah.
And I know it's because the trade-off is the time and talent of the parents rather than them paying for somebody else's time and talent. But
that's right.
But still the honor's there. That parents still are the best teachers of their kids. And it's been proven that this is Barry's first point, the further removed from parents the educational decision making is, the less good it is.
Yeah.
And that might mean that for parents who can't do the homeschooling thing and are paying the tuition or are just dealing with what their taxes have paid for, they still got to be involved.
That's right.
And that's part of that honoring. I mean, frankly, what I want more than anything else as a teacher is supportive parents.
Yes. Let me say you're wrong. You don't want supportive parents. You want to support parents.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
You work in loco parentis, right? In the place of the parent. And so I know what you mean, and I hear you, and I agree with you.
No, I appreciate your distinction.
But I'm trying to articulate it even more precisely.
You can't pass your parenting off to me.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm here. I'm gonna help, but it's still your child. He's still your child.
It's really awesome if they and I are rowing the boat in the same direction.
Yes, exactly. Like when the parent is doing the work, I'm not even sure I want to reduce it to work, fulfilling the office of parent.
There you go.
Then when I step into that office momentarily, right, during the school day, the child's like, okay, I know how this goes.
Right.
And we both understand, we all of us understand, I'm just helping out here. And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, that is my desire to support parents in the education of their children. And so if they send me, or rather, if the parents send their child to a school where I am to do that, great. Hey, awesome. If it's on this podcast, then awesome too, right?
Right.
We want to support parents in the cultivation of wisdom and virtue in their children. And it's only when, like you say, the parent is removed from that role or it gets increasingly further away, distanced, that the roles become unclear, right?
And above all else, the child becomes confused.
Mm-hmm. And then, it must be said, entitled, right?
Well, I mean, a number of things can happen in that
Sure.
confusion.
Sure.
Entitlement is certainly one of them.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of other things that our youth
That's true.
today are dealing with.
That's true.
Because the disformation of education
Mm-hmm.
isn't a money issue. It's a role issue, and I think that's what Barry's talking about. It needs to get local, really local.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And I do believe that if parents, I'm shocked at how many parents are surprised after the fact by what their children are being taught in school. Mm-hmm. One of those fundamental aspects of asking a school, allowing a school to teach my children is that I'm already convinced this is a good thing.
Right.
Through knowledge,
Right.
not through pie in the
Experience,
sky
yeah.
kind of. I'm assuming they want the best. I need to assure myself.
Right.
So, good talk. As always, I hope you appreciate me more.
Okay. Yes. Very good. Appreciation, honor, whatever we say. Support, I think, is what I'm walking away with this from this conversation with. Right.
So,
the notion of supporting the parent. That is our proper vocation.
Yep. Gift certificates to good local bookstores.
Yes, please.
They're always appreciated.
Very much so. Very much so.
Get your education. Backwoods education. You can't have your meat if you don't eat your vegetables.